Good evening and welcome to the Town of Hillsborough 2021, June 2021 budget meeting. And we will go ahead and open the work session and have the roll call, please.
Commissioner Bell,
Present.
Commissioner English,
Present.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Present.
Commissioner Hughes,
Present.
Commissioner Lloyd,
Present.
Mayor Weaver.
I am also present. And welcome everyone. It's great to see your faces. And Rob, I know you are having some technical issues, but we know that you're here with us. So welcome everyone. And moving on to item number 2, agenda changes and approval. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing and hearing none, do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Bell, seconded by Commissioner Ferguson, and we can roll call the agenda approval.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd,
And the agenda is unanimously approved. Item number 3, the consent agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
We've got a motion to approve by Kathleen,
Second.
seconded by Mark, and we can roll call the approval of the consent agenda.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd,
And that is also approved unanimously. And moving on to the real meat of our discussion tonight is item number 4. Item 4A is the budget workshop for FY 2022. And I want to thank the town manager for, first of all, the terrific budget message that was very clear and detailed, and also just reminding us of the process for our discussion tonight, which is we will do the different funds one at a time. And we'll just go through it with questions being led by Jen or Emily. We will actually start with the Stormwater Fund. And I'm not sure, Jen, I see your camera on. Are you going to do the Stormwater Fund for us?
I will, yes.
Okay, and is Terry coming in or is he here if we have questions? Yeah, I see him.
He's here if we have questions.
Okay, great. So Terry is with us, but he won't have to sit through the other 3 funds. So we're going to do stormwater first. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Jen.
Great, thank you. Yep, so we're starting in reverse order tonight. If we could just start off with stormwater and see if there's any questions or comments from any of the board members, we can get started that way.
The only question I have, I'm not seeing anyone else turn their microphone on. Am I missing? And Jen, I'm going to let you drive the train. So let me behave better and say I have a question.
Yeah, Mary Jen.
Yeah. So really the only question, and this is for Terry, just to get a little feedback for him on something, if we could invite him in. Hi, Terry.
Good evening.
So just, I don't want to belabor this, but just, thank you for pulling all this together. And I just wondered, because of, we are seeing these increased rain events and, additional question and feedback from the public about different problem areas throughout town. Can you just say a little bit, perhaps for the benefit of those who might be tuning in and for the rest of us, of what your doing right now to kind of, assess what the need is. I see there's funds for the analysis and planning. Could you just touch on that briefly for us?
Sure. So we, in fact, very recently just updated some of our plans under our stormwater permit as the state is changing how they want us to do some things. And that includes an operation and maintenance plan for our stormwater infrastructure that the town maintains. And so, as y'all know, we've been using Cornwallis Hills sort of as our model to kind of get through and figure out how to do this. And one of the things that we're going to be doing now is each fiscal year we'll be assessing at least one, what we're calling neighborhood. Is really an area. It may be a residential neighborhood, it may be commercial, but we will be looking at least one to assess those needs. And we're starting with the oldest stuff first. So, Collins Ridge will be very, very far down the line, we hope. And so from that assessment, we'll look at, just like we did with Cornwallis Hills, those immediate maintenance needs. And then from that, we will be, again, just like we've done with Cornwallis Hills, we'll work with the folks in that those areas that may have concerns and maybe further identify areas that need some additional, maybe some engineering analysis like we're doing in Cornwallis Hills. So that's sort of what we're doing. And then part of that, so we're working very closely with Public Works with that, trying, and in fact, we're trying to come up with a very simple process for them to be able to do that as initial assessment. And then my division will be working with them to identify potential water quality improvements that would then be credited under the UNRBA's IAIA program, and so meet our Falls Lake compliance. So it's kind of a two-prong approach in that regard.
Thank you very much. That's super helpful.
Thanks, Terry. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, I'm not seeing any, so I think we can move on to the next fund. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me go first.
And I think Marie will be joining us shortly. So I'm not seeing anyone else from Water and Sewer. I'm wondering if we should go on to General Fund to give her some time. All right. I'll turn it over to Emily.
Okay, so we will now look at the general fund, and thought we would do kind of as we've done in previous years, where we kind of go department by department and just sort of, there's no questions, we'll keep moving, but if someone has a question, speak up and we'll stop and discuss further. So we'll start with, in the general government, there's the disaster department, which was sort of the temporary department for expenses related to COVID. That one's pretty much going away this year, but are there any questions related to that one? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to governing body. All right. Administration. Accounting. Jen.
So if you will, this is for my own sake, I think it might, I don't know if it'll help others too, but if you, because I'm scrolling quickly as you are going, but I also have page numbers written, and it just might help me if you,
Sure.
When you get to the page of the department, if you could say what page that's on, that will help me a little bit know where, just with my screen.
Absolutely. Thank you for the suggestion. So accounting starts on page 37. And if we need to go back, if I went too fast, we can definitely do that too. Planning starts on page 40. Mayor Weaver.
just a quick question that wasn't clear to me from the Excel, from these spreadsheets that I'm sure everyone is very excited about getting rid of. But with the intern, are those interns paid?
Almost always, yes.
Okay.
Stormwater has taken advantage of, I think, of a few unpaid interns, but we do generally pay the interns.
Great. I thought that was the case, but I couldn't remember or quite discern. So thank you.
Any other questions for planning? Commissioner Hughes?
Yeah, the question I have for planning, and I flagged it in the document that I had sent over to Eric, and he responded to on Friday. But my only question is, and maybe this is not sure when we came or when we were going to tackle it a little bit, but just about the let's see, the parking study for the planning department, and just I know originally the funding split, according to Eric, was suggested by the tourism board and TDA, but if staff's not opposed to the town paying a larger portion, I would like for that to happen, but you know, I'm a little fuzzy from remembering our last budget process when we would make that change, but that would be something I think that would be really good to also free up some funds for the tourism board and the TDA to do some more directly related to tourism work.
I'll just say that I think that kind of feedback is always helpful the sooner it comes. So now is a perfectly great time to say that. And I agree, I'm not opposed to seeing the town pay a larger portion of this. This was something that actually initiated from the 2 advisory boards or volunteer boards, since they aren't really advisory, they're independent. And so that's why we had the mostly even funding split, but yeah.
They seem to be a little bit more judicious in how they're spending their money lately. So, and I get to be their conduit on that feedback.
Yeah, that's fine.
Any other questions or comments related to planning? Mayor Weaver?
I just had a follow-up on Matt's question, which is, Margaret, could you just say a little bit more about that parking study? Because I know we've had one in somewhat recent history. I don't know, maybe that one is dated. My question is, what new information are we trying to get from this study?
Well, that I don't have the dates handy, but those 2 studies that we did were around the time that the justice facility was being built. So that helps people place it in their memories. There's been a lot of change in downtown since then. We are also aware of a number of properties that might come up for redevelopment in the relatively near future. And so, one, the study needs to be updated to make sure that we understand whether we have a parking problem. That's always the first question, because there's always a perception of a parking problem and it's not always borne out in reality. So that's job 1. Do we have a parking problem? And then talk about what some of the areas that might redevelop could be, and how much development does the board want to encourage in downtown with part of that redevelopment, and take into account special events that continue to happen in downtown, and identify what those parking needs are and see whether or not we have sufficient parking, whether we should adjust our parking requirements so that when some of those sites redevelop, the onus is on those developers to provide their parking, or whether the town really wants to branch out and more proactively provide parking. Board members may remember that we actually lease that Churton Street parking lot that kind of wraps around the police station from the property owner. And at any time they could choose to discontinue our lease or make it a more market rate for the parking, because right now we are not paying market for those parking spaces. So there are a lot of things at play that could greatly influence both what development looks like, but also what our tourism program can look like in downtown, and what we can sustain and what we can support. And so we're hoping to identify a lot of these issues with that study. Just for a point of comparison, Carborough regularly does these parking studies. The one we did with staff. We went out and counted parking spaces because we didn't even have an inventory, and then checked for turnover. This next one will be more in depth and a little more scientific than people walking by and counting whether or not a space is full, to try and get toward that more robust information that we need to more adequately determine what our parking needs are in downtown. And Carborough redoes theirs on a fairly regular basis. So this is something that gets dated very quickly as businesses change over.
And then one quick follow-up that is a little bit of a mushy question, and there's not a way to answer this at this time. That's okay. I'm curious about how any conversations that might come up as part of the comprehensive sustainability planning process might relate to this, because I can imagine that there might be some tension between, thoughts on parking, and what direction the town might be going in. So any reaction to that?
Well, I mean, it's our study, so we control when we start. We can start in July, or we can start next June when the comprehensive sustainability plan is a little bit further along. We control that, and we can do it when we think it's reasonable. The main intent was to get ahead of any redevelopment proposals that might come in for those properties. And for those who might be unaware, the detention facility on US 70 is getting very near finish. So that means that the pressure on the potential redevelopment of the detention facility downtown becomes more real every day. And so we'll just have to weigh those options out and decide what's more pressing and what has priority in terms of when we start what.
Oh, just regarding the cost allocation on the study, and then following up on the mayor's question on timing, is there a suggestion from the board on how to change the cost allocation so budget staff knows how to change those numbers around?
I think I'll just jump in and say, why don't you go ahead, Matt, and then Kathleen.
Definitely. Sorry, I have like a little truncated version. I think the original breakdown was 35 from planning, 32 from the tourism board, and 32% from the TDA. And if those numbers stay the same, or not to say the same, if the estimate remains the same, which I believe, just doing mental math in my head, that's a total of $50,000. Man, that's a lot of money. That 25% or 25,000 would come from planning, and then 2.5 thousand each from the tourism board and the TDA. I will say the tourism board did adopt its budget earlier tonight and zeroed it out on the tourism board, just with the understanding that we would need to likely just do a budget amendment next fiscal year, not knowing what the dollar figure would be. So that would just be my kind of feedback on more of a 50, 25, 25 than the 35, 32, 32 breakdown.
Mayor, excuse me, Commissioner Ferguson.
And I'm actually, I'm not ready to vote on that or anything, and I'm not willing to commit because we have so many unfunded. And I'm still pondering over those, and I'd much rather have some of, if we can, meet some of the unfunded before we increase our amount, because I think some of the unfunded has greater need.
So I know that one of the other suggestions that the town manager made in, outlining the course of how things went this evening is to go through the details and questions of the fund, and then, make some of these specific decisions, at our next meeting after that. So perhaps staff can come back with a couple options, as it is now, and Commissioner Hughes's suggestion, and then we can decide that at the appropriate time after we have all of our full information. Does that sound good to folks?
Okay, because there are a couple unfunded that if we can fund, it's certainly, I would like to see it.
Okay, so we will come back at the next meeting on the 14th with some thoughts on that. All right, any other questions for planning? All right, seeing none, we'll move to the Town Hall campus, which is page 47.
I'll just jump in here and say one of the things that is not reflected in the budget is the operation expenses for the Fairview Community Center, and we'll be moving those from the police to this budget just to move toward the concept of a facilities budget. And so we'll be pulling those out and putting them in this site, and we're continuing to creep forward on implementing that lease agreement.
Any questions for Town Hall campus? All right, seeing none, public space, page 49. Commissioner Hughes?
This is another one that I had mentioned, which was, one of the unfunded, I think it was unfunded for public space. I think that we have, really committed ourselves to some lofty goals, particularly with multimodal ways of getting around town. And I know that the funds for the study of whether or not to build a pedestrian bridge over I-85, that was, I know it's just a kind of a concept currently, but I think that if we could at least get that feasibility study, or just to see if it's even possible. If we find out it's not possible, then that would be great. I'm just kind of cognizant that, as the federal government talks more and more about infrastructure, that if we can do as much of this as possible, and you find out it's a really good possibility of connecting the southern end of town, that it would be really good to have that. But I'm kind of curious though, if just the analysis for it, why staff didn't fund or recommend funding the analysis part of it, and instead keep it in unfunded. I was kind of interested.
That's because it moves from one budget to the next when it moves from being a conceptual to an actual design. And so that first cut of analysis is funded in the planning department budget. And then the actual real design, assuming that we find that it's feasible, that real design then is funded in the public space budget in the next fiscal year. So it is funded. It's just, we didn't jump right into design, not knowing whether it's feasible, because a lot of the money that we leverage from the MPO, you have to make that commitment that you're going to go ahead and build it when you get into design. And we thought it was more prudent to do this first level of analysis at the planning stage before really committing to full design. It takes a little bit longer, but it doesn't tie up as much funds for as long.
So what would be a possibility if we find out next fiscal year that it is feasible? Would we just find the funds and scrap them together and do a budget amendment for design, or how would that work? Or would we still be looking at FY, whatever FY? I know the FYs kind of confuse me sometimes, but would we just basically just wait an additional fiscal year, or would we try and move the funds sooner?
We could, that's funding that flows to us through the MPO. So we have to follow their schedule and their kind of amendment process. So another option would be to, excuse me, would be to pursue an amendment in their funding plan to proceed more quickly. So it is possible. I just didn't want to set it up that way. Plus, staff can only manage so many of these planning processes. You're talking about the same folks who are managing the comprehensive sustainability plan, managing this design project, along with all their other work. That begins to be too much when you're talking about robust outreach, but there is a possibility that we could move it faster. And Stephanie is in the audience, so if I'm overstepping, please raise your hand and we'll bring you in.
Commissioner Ferguson?
The one of the unfunded that I am keen on is increasing the sanitation cleaning of the restrooms. And I just, the complaints I've gotten in personal experience is, I think of it's just nasty. That's all I can say. A lot of times I've gone into the restrooms, turn around, and it's like, I would rather have a tree. And then I think about, it's little kids and families, and I put restroom cleaning as one of those. It's just safety, public health. And I know it's a challenge that we have in staff. It's labor intensive and such, but again, I look at it, it's public health.
Stephanie?
Okay, I wasn't sure if I should wait to be called on. So the original request for increasing the number of daily cleanings is related to sanitizing for COVID, and that is the schedule that we've been on over the past year. That schedule was developed in coordination with the parks directors of Chapel Hill, Carver, and Orange County. All 4 jurisdictions increased their daily sanitizing of surfaces and restrooms at the same time.
And it was wonderful.
Mostly so we could have a consistent message to the public, and so that the public had an understanding of how the facilities were being maintained. Well, in continuing to work with the parks directors of the other jurisdictions, those daily sanitations are reducing at the beginning of the new fiscal year back to what they were prior to the COVID pandemic. And so I believe that was the adjustment that the manager made with the new information from the other jurisdictions, that we would go back to twice a week cleaning, which is what we used to do. And we do use contractors for that service. It's not our own town staff. So,
well, it's just not but the previous. It's just not enough. I mean, I'm just saying, I've seen it personally, firsthand. My daily walks, and during COVID, it's been great because it has, they've been clean, but when it was the twice a week, multiple times. I'm just gonna say, So it's, I know that this is not the sexiest of things, but it's one of those basics that it just looks bad on us. And like I said, I would rather use a tree on some days when I've gone in. It's like I've turned around and walked out and died. It was like, how quickly can I get home? Because it was just, ugh. And like I said, I've heard numerous complaints. So, and I understand there are other pieces, but if we can, I very much would like to see us improve cleanliness. And it may not be every day, but somewhere a happy medium.
Commissioner English?
I'd just like to piggyback on what Kathleen was saying. I think I don't think 2 days is enough. At least during our busiest times. I know there's certain times of the year that, you know, the parks and the restrooms are used more than others, and this is one of them. But if we're going to provide a place for people to use the bathrooms, then we need to, you know, make sure that they represent Hillsborough and how we want, you know, them to be cleaned and what they look like. So I would like to see something more than 2 times a day too. Whether we get to 5 or 7 days, I don't know, but I think 2 is inadequate right now. So I'd like to see a little bit more and take a look at that a little bit more too.
And Commissioner Bell, I think I saw your hand raised in there for period. Wasn't sure if you still had a question or comment.
Thank you. It was on an earlier topic regarding the MPO and planning ahead for those kinds of construction projects. And Mayor Jen might have some additional insight into this as well. But if we do get to that phase where we're seriously thinking about and doing a feasibility study, it might also be helpful to just have some input from the MPO on from staff on the MPO about what kind of timeline we might be looking at. Experience tells me that it might be like a 10-year kind of project. And that these things get rescored all the time. So what may sound like a good idea next year might get shot down the year after that before funding is committed. It's just such a complicated and long process for that kind of stuff. I just don't want to get our hopes up to be able to do something in the next 2 or 3 years when in reality it might take 7, 8, or 10 years.
I'll just jump in and say that if we are intending to use state DOT funds to build a pedestrian bridge over I-85, that is a 10+ year horizon, period, end of story. It is not going to happen any sooner unless there is some magical new money that comes available. That's a $4 million bridge. And that is not, that like swamps the entire budget on what the state DOT spends on bike and pedestrian infrastructure in the entire state in a year. So we either need to find other ways to pay for this, pay for it ourselves, or wait. Unfortunately, that is just the reality of transportation funding in this state. There is not a prioritization for bike and pedestrian facilities, no matter what this region wants. And it is going to be hard to fund that through the traditional TIP process. Not to say that there aren't other sources out there. We're very hopeful that some of these infrastructure grants will come up with something, that there might be something related to climate change that we'll get as lucky as we got with Riverwalk. But just, I want folks to understand that if we aren't coming up with $4 million locally, then this is a long-term project. There's just no other way around it.
Any other questions or comments related to public space? And Eric, just to touch base real quickly, so now that we've added a few topics that the board is interested in, do we want to take a pulse on these topics now, or sort of come back at either next week with more on those particular items? Or do you have any suggestions or preferences?
Well, the ones that I've got noted so far is the parking study allocation and anyway, all the ones we've covered so far, I think we can just bring back to the board. There may be some that we do need more specific direction on tonight. I'm not sure how to define that, but I think just generating a list that we can bring back to the board. And some of those things like restroom cleaning, staff can come back and say, hey, we're going to bump it from 2 days to 4 days or whatever it is. Here's the cost number, and just give the board an update, preferably next week.
Okay, thank you. All right, in that case, I will move on to safety and risk management, which is page 58. All right, seeing no questions, and again, if I go too fast, feel free to stop me. Information and services on page 61. Commissioner Bell? I believe you're muted.
I wanted to ask if the Office 365 licensing fee seemed really high to me. In my mind, that came out to about $29 per month per employee. And I was just wondering if we knew what the actual charge is for that.
I would have to touch base with our IT manager, Beth Jurgensen, to find out what the fee is. I think there are, if I recall correctly, there's multiple licenses rolled into that, not just the Office licenses, but I can get more specifics from her. Any other IT related questions? All right, police administration, which is now the all of the police budget has been consolidated into police admin, and that's on page 65.
Emily, I have a question that's a bit of a tangent, but this is actually, I think, a question for Margaret, which in looking at, so there's a request here to have that work done to the exterior building, on the police department, and of course, support that 100%. I think I just had a question about assuming that the facilities manager position is approved. How would that work in the future? Would we see that coming from the facilities coordinator, or would we still see these in departmental requests for that kind of maintenance?
The answer is we don't know yet.
Okay.
We just aren't far enough along to really know how that is all going to play out. And so I just can't answer that in a meaningful way.
To tag on or add on to what Margaret said, for the upcoming fiscal year, we still have budgeted maintenance at the department level for the most part. And then we did put a nominal amount in the public space budget for things that may come up as that position comes on board. I'm sure they're going to identify and see things that maybe we hadn't planned on addressing. So we did put some additional funds for that. But as Margaret said, I think we'll address that kind of as we go. Commissioner Ferguson? I believe you're on mute.
Yeah, whenever I see this, as I still think of our public works building. But, it's these kinds of repairs, I don't like deferring this kind, because I look at this as structural safety, and they just get worse and worse and more expensive the more we defer.
I think that's a funded request. I think.
Sorry?
I believe those are,
Were
Those
they, I
repairs are
misread then.
funded.
I was thinking it was unfunded. Hold on, I may have misread. Whoa, I just lost it. If I misread, then never mind.
I'll say I had a similar thought that Kathleen had originally when I reviewed the budget, and I thought it wasn't funded, and I reread it. I think it was something like the sequencing of the pages or something kind of throws you off.
Yeah, I see that now that it was. So my apologies. I just, it just, for some reason, I was thinking that it wasn't. So never mind.
Any other questions for police? All right, seeing none, we'll move to fire protection, which is now the consolidated fire protection and fire marshal budgets. And that is on page 101. All right, seeing no questions, move on to fleet maintenance, which is
And
on
I just
page,
have-
sure.
I just have a quick question in terms of your page numbers, because mine aren't matching up with yours, and I don't. Which is street maintenance, or what was the next one?
Fleet maintenance is 103.
Okay, I got 109, but it's fine. I'll find it.
Rob, I'm guessing that the difference is you might be looking at the budget document that's wrapped within the agenda packet, and Emily's probably looking at the one that's on its own.
All right, seeing no questions, streets is on page 106.
Oh, actually, Emily, I just realized in getting bogged down in figuring out page numbers, could we go back to policing real fast?
Sure.
This might be a question for Eric. So I know that in the unfunded line, it's the four possible officers we will need as the town grows, and I think that's set potentially, or it was an unfunded request for FY24, and I think that's a good summary that you sent back. Typically, like how have we budgeted? Because I'm assuming over time we have realized that the town was growing, we needed more police officers as a result, or something along those lines. So in the past, how have we budgeted for that? Is it, we kind of know it's going to happen, but we don't really fund it now just to kind of wait and see, or how has that happened before, like when Waterstone was being built and some other developments?
Well, it was interesting when Waterstone was first being proposed. I can't even remember the initial name. Commissioner Lloyd may remember, but the town board shot that down. We did a major financial analysis. We did another one, and I called it from an analysis Waterstone fever. Everybody was asking for tons and tons of positions, but then it turned out we were able to manage these additional spaces without a lot. But then leaping forward so about 11 years ago, when the Great Recession hit, we eliminated about 15 to 20% of the police department positions. We were closer to the mid 30s. I think we eliminated about 15% of all our general fund positions. There was no water and sewer fund positions cut, as an aside, though we didn't add really any more for 10 years. So we did that big cut around 2010, give or take a year. And then from that, we've just sort of held the line for the most part during those periods. I'm sure there's been a couple of years where we've added strategically a position or two, and there's been some adjustments inside the department, but we've just waited until there was a an apparent need as opposed to anticipating. Now, of course, Collins Ridge is going to be adding a lot of people in that area. So it's completely legitimate to be, which is why Chief Hampton made the request. And I think if, and we can bring Chief Hampton on to talk about it. It is hard to predict 3 years from now what we're going to need, but knowing that we're talking about a $500,000 expense in FY24, and then the ongoing, it's a significant amount of money. And as my comment was, before we committed to such a large expense, I would rather let us get a little bit closer or use a smaller number if the board wanted to include that in FY24, the financial plan, and try to be more strategic with some hires. Just from having discussions with Chief, as he's made some reorg this year, they're able to put people in where there's a higher need. It may be that we need 4 people on a shift, but I worry that if we did that, it would be a huge expense and we wouldn't see a whole lot of difference in service. But those are just random thoughts. It's a tough question to address. I definitely invite the chief to add his thoughts as well.
I can chime in real quick. I mean, it is very difficult to predict, what our need's going to be. Even something like Collins Ridge, we won't really know for sure until it comes in and we start seeing how it impacts service. My philosophy with putting this on there is just to keep it, intention was to keep it as an unfunded, because that is a really big number to project when we have really no feedback to base it on. But I thought it was important that you guys see it and can have that discussion. If we get a couple of years down the road and the data starts showing us we're having a problem, then this is something that may have to become much more of a reality. To Eric's point, a lot will have to do with how it impacts our ability to maintain the service level. And even then, if there is a decline in service level, there's still a decision point of whether that is going to be acceptable or not. And then, like I said, unfortunately, with something like patrol staffing, I'd love to add, a body here and a body there and work our way up to it, but you don't really accomplish anything by adding one person. With patrol coverage, we generally would have to add 4. We have done a lot of alignment changes since that request was put in. There is a possibility that if things got bad, the way we're working our rotations now, we might be able to actually see an improvement with 2, but I just don't know yet. So largely this was a placeholder just to get that on everybody's radar. If the town continues to grow, at some point we have to make a decision between quality of service or additional staff.
Chief, could you follow up on service level piece? Because I don't want someone to who might be watching this at home to say, well, I just saw the article where Asheville is determining which crimes they respond to. So could you, for anyone who's watching, just kind of explain what that means?
Well, what Asheville's dealing with is the ultimate bad situation in terms of service quality. They're having to make decisions about what they're going to be responding to. In my mind, when I talk about our service level, Hillsborough does a lot more than small towns our size, especially in terms of what our law enforcement officers do, how they engage with people, what they're involved in. Those are things that take time. Our officers right now have that discretionary time to problem solve, to engage with people, to work on community problems. The more that calls for service increases, the less of that discretionary time is out there. And that's ultimately the decision point we would have to make. The situation Asheville is facing is somewhat artificial. I mean, it's just a bad circumstance of being extremely short-staffed. That could happen to us as well. That has nothing to do with what we're budgeted. That's simply a matter of having bodies, in positions. Right now, we're in good shape with that. But I'm thinking more of the longer term service quality of that above and beyond quality of service that we give to people and all the little things that we're able to do with that extra time.
Okay. Any other questions for Chief Hampton or related to the police budget? Seeing none, thank you, Dwayne. We are at fleet maintenance, which was page 103, give or take, depending on if you're in the agenda packet or the standalone budget version. All right, seeing no questions. Streets is on page 106. Okay, seeing no questions. Oh, and streets is now consolidated with Powellville. And so solid waste would be next, which is page 113.
Sorry, Emily, I do have a repaving question.
Sure.
I was just, if I'm remembering correctly, which I might not be, with the shift to, did we slow down our repaving schedule at some point to kind of help deal with Valley Forge? Or am I making that up? I was just curious if we were staying on the same schedule or if that had changed.
We deferred or redirected much of the resurfacing money in FY21, the current fiscal year, to address Valley Forge. So yes, we sort of took a time out on it, but we're looking to resume that for FY22.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Eric?
Oh, just to add an interesting tidbit of information. I been reading other local governments' budgets in our region, and so we're going to spend about $400,000 a year on street repaving and street paving. And there's an area jurisdiction that's probably like 8 to 10 times larger than us. And I saw in their budget they were spending a little over $600,000. And this goes back to one of the articles we read a while back that one of the major cities in the area was on a 40 to 50 year cycle for repaving their streets. And we had done the analysis that the best return on your investment is to do it about every 20 years because it's less expensive to do it. But anyway, that was just to thank the board for taking care of what we've got. It's not exciting, but it saves money over the long run. And our crews don't have to patch a lot of potholes.
All right. Seeing no other questions for streets, solid waste was on 113. Okay. Seeing no questions, cemetery is 116. Commissioner Bell?
Yeah, so I've had a couple of conversations in the past week regarding the Nichols family cemetery, which is behind the town annex. It is the family cemetery of Joe Nichols, who was John Barry's main enslaved carpenter. And he is really significant to the town and all the work that John Barry ever did after 1840. And this is a late breaking request, but I would like, I don't know if Stephanie is available to chime in on this, but I would like to consider adding $2,000 to the cemetery budget to clear out the cemetery. It's kind of derelict right now, and maybe mulch a path so visitors can access it. I think over the next year, the Alliance, the Burwell School, and the museum are all very interested in having an interpretive sign eventually made, and this to become a destination for our African-American walking tour in Hillsborough.
I'm sorry, when I was moved from the audience and I missed a part of what you were saying, so I don't know what my response is, but I believe that cemetery hasn't been maintained by the town in the past, so it is there's a new topic of conversation that probably warrants some consideration and looking into the actual ownership. That's not been under our purview in the past.
So it's not on, we don't know if it's on town property or not?
It's my understanding that it is not, that it is carved out as a separate parcel that belongs to the Nichols family. And many of these old private cemeteries have no mailing address. So I don't know that we know who is actually responsible. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if the cemetery is actually fenced completely. So we would need to do some research, which we can absolutely do. But at this point, my understanding is that it is definitely not our land.
Okay.
But
I
you would
withdraw.
you would indeed have to cross town property to access it. So
And there are easements in place for that. That access is deeded on our easement, on our annex property land very clearly. But, and that's what makes me think we definitely don't own the cemeteries, otherwise we wouldn't have to provide the access.
Well, I will withdraw that request and then report back to these organizations that it's probably not on town property, but use the next year to figure out how they might organize to help preserve it. It was fenced in 1975 and it looks like nothing has been done since 1975. Thank you.
Commissioner English?
So I know Commissioner Hughes had brought up replacing that fence, at the town cemetery. And I wanted to see if it was an option to potentially look at landscape barrier as opposed to just a fence. I don't even know if that's, an option, but I find it better looking at natural things than just a plain fence. But if that's an option, I'd like to check it to see if it possibly would be.
I was gonna say, I think rather than jerking Stephanie back into the room again one time, although Sarah might be doing that, yep. Yeah, she can speak more intelligently about how much space there is actually there for landscaping to go in.
are we talking about the fence in the town cemetery?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I lose audio every time I move. So there's really no potential for landscaping there, Rob. And the reason is that there's kudzu everywhere. And so it would just get totally eaten up by the kudzu. With a fence, because it's hardscaping, we can at least, mow and weed eat around it. And it does provide some privacy. But in this situation, the kudzu is so out of control on the bank behind the town property, on the neighboring property, that there's really no way we can use a green buffer here.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like you've already considered that and looked into it. Appreciate the info.
Any other questions related to cemetery? All right, seeing none, economic development is on page 118. Commissioner Hughes?
I'm not sure if this is a question for Margaret or for Eric, but when would we know with the redistribution of duties, when we'll know the breakdown of the salary position that is cost shared with the TDA and the tourism board?
We'll have some idea at the end of the calendar year, but we won't really know for certain until it gets to be more like this time next year, because we have to hire some positions and get them started. So we could take a stab at it. We could take a stab at it now with no information. We could take a stab in December and have a little bit more information, or we could do it sometime in the spring. Or we could keep doing it all. We could do it all the time in iterations and get progressively closer.
I just know that relaying some information from some members of the tourism board that, it was just a concern that, as the economic development planner's responsibility shifts seemingly away from TDA and tourism board, especially, I know one of the things we had mentioned was, how much could we probably send to an a part-time position or even a contracted out position. And so there was just some concerns expressed that, the breakdown, get as close as we can. But if we need more information, figure out what that is, then I guess we'll be in a wait and see just to see how that turns out.
And I think when we're in next year's budget session, we might actually be looking at more of a contract service agreement between the town and those two boards for services, so that the services can rest with multiple people rather than just one individual.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Any other questions related to economic development? All right, seeing none. Special appropriations is on page 120. Commissioner Bell?
Yes, I have, I promise this is the second of only two late-breaking special requests that have come to my attention in the past week. It came to my attention at the recent Memorial Day celebration at the Orange County Veterans Memorial in Chapel Hill that Hillsborough is the only municipal or government in Orange County that has not made a contribution to the establishment of that memorial. And I don't have the figures in front of me, but it seems like the county, Chapel Hill, and Carrboro have made proportionate donations to this memorial, and that the idea had been floated, a couple of years ago when it was kind of in the idea stage. But now the monument is firmly established, and it's about halfway towards its goal of being completely built out. And I learned that I'm the only elected official in all of Orange County that served in the military. And I enjoy participating in the memorial event, and am very interested in Veterans Affairs. So I would like to advocate for adding $7,500 to the budget for next year, so Hillsborough can make a contribution on behalf of all its veterans towards that memorial.
And I was going to say, I also kind of got cornered at another Veterans Day event. I think a lot of the same folks had participated in both that one and the event at the New American Legion post. And I also don't have the numbers in front of me of what the various jurisdictions gave, but I was actually going to go higher and actually recommend $10,000, but I can get behind 7,500 too.
I will just add that this is something that former Mayor Tom mentioned to me as near the end of his last term. I mentioned this to Mark that day after the ceremony at the memorial site. That Eric, you had said to Tom, we ought to probably think about doing something here. And so I just want to offer my apologies of that having been mentioned to me. And then I haven't done anything to follow up on that, but I do think it's important that we make a contribution, and I would be in support either of what Mark has offered, or if the town manager has another suggestion when we have some numbers in front of us that we can kind of see, what our counterparts had done, and then come back to us with a number. I think that would be fine too.
Eric?
We're happy to add whatever figure the Commissioner Bell or Commissioner Hughes suggested. And if there's a way for us to, if the board wants the additional information to hear, to learn how much the other organizations gave, please let me, I'm not sure where to access that, but just for a placeholder, we'll put the $7,500 to $10,000 on the list we bring back to you next week.
Thank you.
And just to close that loop, Mark, would you like me to seek that information out about what the other entities have contributed, or would you like to do that? I just want to be sure somebody does it.
Yeah, I think I can get that pretty quickly. I'm already
Great.
in communication with the lead fundraiser. Yeah, and I'll share that to the board and town manager.
Any other questions for special appropriations? Eric?
And the board, you may want to discuss this later, but one of the sort of a late piece of information I sent out last Friday, the employee raises are included in special appropriations. And in a rare stroke, I was able to actually put something on one page, which I know I don't usually do. But the survey of about 18 jurisdictions in our region found that Italy was I think it was over half, or right around half, were doing about 4% or greater. I had recommended 3.25% raise, which was sort of our standard post-recession. But upon seeing how aggressive in the like some of our neighboring jurisdictions are way more aggressive than 4%. They're doing a lot of other things, and then taking into account that we did not do raises last year, and we're continuing to have trouble like keeping employees and recruiting employees on salary. And one of the things we found out over the years is if you fall behind on your annual merits raises, that you end up having to pay a lot more when you do the comp and class studies going forward. So my recommendation is that we match what the standard in our area is, which is 4%. And ideally, if we could go to 4.25%, I think that would be better, especially since there was no compensation for employees this current fiscal year.
Yeah, I think we can decide that for, oh, go, sorry, Margaret. I'm sorry, Emily, I'll be quiet until I raise my hand.
I just wanted to ask a question. I know that I've heard from a number of employees that have heard that proposal, and there's a lot of support amongst the employees for that as well. Just curious of whether all of that would be paid out through the merit system, or whether there was any thought of doing some sort of flat raise to kind of recognize last year and then do the standard attached to merit. And this might not be the right place to ask it, but the floor seemed to be a little bit open. So I just wanted to throw that out there for thought.
And just to answer Margaret's question, I have not had the time to think of anything else other than just doing the standard merit system that we've done before. Of course, if the board wants to do something different, we can certainly consider that.
Commissioner Ferguson?
I definitely it can be behind and support having a flat increase plus merit. This was extraordinary times, and staff were freaking amazing. And if we can make the budget work to do that, I would support that completely.
Mayor Weaver, did you have a question?
I just wanted to, Kathleen said it, so I agree with that sentiment, if that's doable.
And I would go as far as I would support flat the entire 4.25%, because staff just, I'm in awe with what our employees were doing and under such adverse conditions.
Commissioner Hughes?
I was just going to say, I'd be in favor of just making it flat, given an across the board raise, and not tying it to in any sort of way merit. I think a lot of our employees have worked very hard, and I wouldn't want them to feel as though there's a chance that they might not be eligible. I don't know how our merit system typically works. And I don't want to get into the details and feel like I'm micromanaging our HR process, but I think, if we could say, effective July 1st, here's, 4.25% across the board, then I think that would be probably very well received.
Commissioner English?
So I just want to clarify what Margaret was proposing too. I'm 100% fully supportive of giving our town staff or the Hillsborough town staff an increase, whether it's a merit increase or some combination of both. But Margaret, were you saying that they would get something in FY21, like a one-time payment, and then an increase of less than 4.25% in fiscal year 22?
Well, the way I was looking at it is that we budget, like 3.25% to 3.5% to accommodate the merit increases. And so some people get 5%, some people get 2%, some people don't get anything based on their goals and their performance. And with the recommendation to take that number higher, we've been cautioned in the past, and we all are aware of creep in the scores, and all the supervisors are going to want to reward their employees for working hard during the pandemic. And I thought perhaps that if, say, some sort of throwing numbers out, and don't want anybody to get attached to this, but if some percentage was just everybody gets a flat percentage raise to recognize the previous year, and then we stay with our merit program for this most recent year, so that those folks who are knocking it out of the park according to the process that we've agreed to continue to see an extra, and everybody who came to work and worked hard also get recognized, kind of a way to split the baby, if you will, because everybody had a hard year, but some folks really knocked it out of the park. And while I recognize that a flat raise for everybody is nice and it's easy, certainly the easy button, I actually think that discourages some of the hardest workers, because they see everybody getting the same. And it also works against some of our compression and progression issues. So that's just my thought. I'm not an HR expert in any stretch of the imagination, just 2 cents and a question. So.
Well, I like what you're proposing. And so if there is a way to potentially come up with something, Eric, I'd like to look at that potential option too. But 100% fully supportive of all the hard work that all the town employees have done this last year and continue to do every day. So it's definitely supportive of it.
We can take the next week to bring some alternatives back to the board. One initial thought, following up on what Margaret said, being able to maintain the merit program was helpful in some components, but as far as let me rewind. We used to do COLAs and merit raises a long time ago, and a lot of places still do cost of living allowances, and some of them do it by percent, and some of them do it by flat dollar amount. So it may be more equitable. I'm just going to make this up. If we said, oh, we're going to do the one-time payment is X percent. Well, X percent for a field level person who's out there actually interacting with the public every day and doing the work is not going to be as much as somebody who's, maybe at a supervisory or division or department head level. So coming up with a flat dollar amount of whatever that is actually more equitable and helps folks on the entry level salary positions more so than the grade. So if we can, let us work with that. So it might be that we come back, I'm just making this up, and say, oh, we're going to stick with the 3.25% for merit, but we're going to come up with a flat figure across the board. So it'll be equal or more than what we did before, but maybe addresses some of the points that have been discussed. But we'll come back with some options for you.
Any other comments or questions related to merit? Any other comments or questions related to special appropriations in general? If not, I do have one follow-up question for this division. A couple weeks ago, we had the Arts Council and the Exchange Club come before you to present the request for FY22, and didn't know if you wanted to discuss their funding levels tonight or if you wanted to defer that till next week. Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up here. So the Exchange Club requested the same funding level they had received the previous year, and the Arts Council requested a slight increase. Commissioner Ferguson?
I'm torn for a couple things. I want to support both, but I'm also cognizant that this year, both organizations have access to fund a lot of funds that we don't, that it flows directly to those organizations through ARP. So I want to be able to support them. But I kind of want to balance with some of the other needs that we have. So I realize I'm speaking contradictory. So the easy way to say is I'm not prepared on dollar figure yet. But I want to find a way to support them if at in some way, form, or fashion.
Mayor Weaver?
Kathleen, I just want to say I appreciate your comments and your excellent reminder about this is a unique year where there are additional funds coming from other places that organizations might be able to look at. And I agree that I would suggest that we, figure out a final number next week when we have some of these, especially when we're asking for more things to be added at this meeting, and see, what the final numbers are next week. I would just offer something to think about between now and then is that these organizations might not be as, they might not be, prepared or as used to the grant funding process. So I think that's just to think about what their capacity is. And I want to hear what other board members have to say, whether we're having a robust discussion now or next week. But both of these have a very special role in our community, and I would suggest that we keep supporting them at least at the levels we have been, and consider the Arts Council's additional request, next week when we have other figures. But those are just my 2 cents at this time.
Commissioner Hughes?
And I would echo that, just because I will say that one of the things that the tourism board had to decide is how we were going to fund our contract partners in light of having diminished or reduced tax revenues on prepared food and beverage. And, I think that a lot of these organizations do kind of run with a shoestring budget. And I will say a lot of them are also looking at new sources of not contract, but grant funding, but it is a new thing to start thinking about. And one of the things that the tourism board really wants is for these organizations to eventually become more financially independent. But I think giving them some runway, essentially, as the mayor is suggesting, would be really important. And I think that's also one reason why I asked previously, what were kind of some of the established guidelines, because, I would like to open up those funds eventually to some other organizations in the community where we could also support them, whether that's get off their feet and expand their reach, or, do some innovative programming that they may not necessarily do. So, and as a lot of these organizations are starting to get their notification letters this month, I would certainly not feel too great to tell them no or reduce the amount, and give them some more time to prepare for that.
Thank you. Commissioner Ferguson?
Yeah, I'm just kind of brainstorming here a little bit because, you know, Mayor Weaver brings up, you know, some of these organizations may or may not have extensive grant writing capacity. Not sure, but certainly with the ARP funding that's coming down, I'm certainly glad to support and, you know, see if we can do some wiggle room, you know, using COG, because that's something that the COGs are in position and we'll know more, but certainly with what we just met with the legislature last week, they've asked for language where we would be taking the lead on providing guidance to municipalities on using ARP funding, and with the arts and performance and Parks and Rec all having multiple pots of funding straight from the feds. You know, we know that there's going to be some strings, but not a whole lot. You know, if there's a way that we can help support the grant writing so that they take advantage of those funds, you know, I'd like to be able to explore some avenues, but having them not apply and relying just on town, I don't think is a good way of going. This is one-time money. It's going to be a fairly healthy pie. It's too much for them to walk away from. And, you know, again, I agree. We need to support them. They are critical to our community. But at the same time, you know, with what is coming down, we can't subsidize in replacement of those funds. That's which I know that's not what's being requested, but we need to encourage as much as we can that they do pursue them. And if, you know, anyway. I'm certainly glad to pursue, at least at the COG level, if that's helpful. I don't know what COGs will do on those other funds, because I don't even know if we're eligible to help with those funds. But
Thank you. Commissioner English?
So, and this may be a question for you, Kathleen, but did Fairview Live not request any funding for the Fairview Live event this year?
Fairview, normally they do it every other year. And with COVID, they had to cancel. They started planning. They actually are meeting right now, or it's now over with. So I don't know if they've started talking about whether or not, but normally it would be for next year. And given that it's June, I think that's best because it typically takes a good 6 to 9 months for them to plan.
Kathleen, do you recall how much we have earmarked in the past for Fairview Live?
1,500. Took me a moment, but yeah, 1,500's been in the budget every other year.
But it seems like that if they're going to plan for it for next year, it would be during the upcoming fiscal year. So
that's correct. It wouldn't be in this year's budget. It'd be, well, hold on. It would be historically, it would be in the year beginning July 1st, because they start their planning in January, February of 2022. They would start collecting their monies in June before the July 1st of the fiscal year 23 budget, because typically Fairview Life is scheduled anytime between June and September.
Okay.
And it varies.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ferguson, just to clarify on that, the 1,500 is currently in the FY23 budget. Is that correct?
Yes, that's,
Okay.
yes, that's the, or whatever the, I may have misspoke. It's whatever the, it's the, wait, 23, it would be, I gotta think, I always get the years. Normally it would have been in the budget to pay for it. Last year, it was canceled. We would skip this year and then it would be planning, it'd be on schedule for next year. So it would be in the budget so that they could pay for things up to June of next year.
Okay, so they'd be spending money the spring of 22.
Correct.
Okay, so we probably need to move the funds to the FY22 budget then.
Because normally they would have been, it's always get the, it's a little bit offset.
Okay, we'll make that change. Thank you for clarifying that.
But like I said, I haven't spoken with them on what their plans are, but I would be surprised if they did not plan on starting the plans for having it next year.
All right, any other questions for special appropriations? All right, seeing none, the last general fund department is contingency. Any, sorry, and that is page 131. Mayor Weaver?
I really apologize. This is not about contingency. This is something I needed to bring up that didn't make it into my notes that I am just now remembering. So I am sorry. And I will start with Margaret, and maybe Stephanie might need to come back in. Early in the pandemic, a part of this is a pandemic brain mush, but early in the pandemic, I ended up having a discussion with Victoria Madison, who brought up this idea of a bench that was promised at the time of the construction of the Nash Street sidewalk. And she wanted to know about this bench. And I did a little, discussion back and forth. And my understanding is that when that, at the time, that there were various, there was some objection in the neighborhood. There's someone who no longer works here who maybe wasn't eager to press the issue about the bench with the neighborhood. And so I'm just wondering about this, if there's a way to get this bench to that neighborhood, because I do believe that or to that Nash Street area, because I do believe that there is understanding that was something that they were, that they had asked for and was said, yes, we can do that. And then it just never happened.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver, because I've had that in my, and I completely forgot, because I've also had those conversations. And I don't know if it's changed, but the last conversation I had, there were people who had ideas in terms of dedication and memorial or recognizing particular families.
Yes, I believe there was a woman who worked at Hillsborough Elementary for a long time who they were hoping to
Also, yeah, the
honor.
McPherson, I was talked to about the McPherson family and
Same, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just waiting for a pause in the conversation to
Sorry.
bring Stephanie in. So now because she misses the conversation when she's in transit. So hopefully she caught most of that. And I'm gonna.
Yep, thank you. So it's been a while, Jen, since you and I
Yeah.
talked about this, and it all
yeah.
happened right at the beginning of COVID. But my memory was that you were going to reach back out to the person who had inquired with you and then put us in touch so that I could start navigating some of the people that are in that neighborhood, just to make sure that we can find a place that's suitable. We actually have one existing bench that could be moved right away. And I do have enough money built into just my infrastructure. It's called maintenance infrastructure streetscape budget for an additional bench. So we don't need to do anything to adjust the budget to make headway on this, but I do need you to put me in touch with the person, or maybe the three of us could talk and just find out. We want to make sure that if we put the bench out, that's something that is wanted and will be received well.
Can do. I'll do that this evening whenever we wrap up here. Thank you, Stephanie.
All right. With that, are there any other questions related to the general fund budget in general, or any other questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, Eric.
Oh, I was going to ask the group if we wanted to take a 5-minute intermission before we let our brains recharge before we jump into water sewer.
I'm going to suggest we just do that. Yes. So there's no pressure. Let's just all do it. So I am guessing that folks who have their cameras off haven't quite made it back to their seats yet. But if you have made it back, turn the camera on so we know you're here. Hi, Rob. And there's another one. While we're waiting for Kathleen to come back, Emily, are you going to be driving the water sewer train, or is it kicking back to Jen?
I'll be kicking it back over to Jen.
Jen, I'm going to suggest that we go ahead and get started. And if we need to backtrack at all, we can certainly do that.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks for a 5-minute recess there. We will go ahead and get started with Water and Sewer Fund's first budget unit, which is disaster relief on page 136. Any questions or comments for disaster relief? All right. I'm not seeing any, so we will turn to administration of enterprise at 138. Any questions there? All right, I'm not seeing any, and I just wanted to mention that Marie Stranwitz, our utilities director, is on the video. So if there's any questions for her, or if she has any points that she would like to make, she can do so. The next one is utilities administration, page 140. All right, we're just cruising along on water and sewer. Next up is billing and collections, page 142. Yes, Commissioner English.
Sorry about that. Can we go back to utilities administration real quick? So what is the, where is that? What is the miscellaneous budgeted for FY22? Or I guess why is it a 5,000% increase?
Yeah, so for FY22, we have a $25,000 plug figure for capital planning assistance. So there's lots of different capital projects that are on the horizon that we don't quite have a plan for in terms of how we're going to fund it. So didn't quite fit nicely in any of the other account lines. So it was added to miscellaneous, but really great question. That's what's driving that increase. Any other questions for utilities administration? All right, so billing and collections 142. All right. Next up is water treatment plant, page 144. All right, we'll move to the next one. We're at West Fork Eno Reservoir, page 154. And Kathleen, if you have any questions for any of the previous ones that we discussed, we can always go back to those as well. You're on mute.
Yeah, no, I was here. I just forgot to turn off my thingy and
Okay,
go
perfect.
live again.
Sounds good. Any questions for the reservoir budget?
Just wait a minute till I've got something more. Let me read it, please.
Okay.
Just a second.
All right. Next is water distribution, page 156. Give everyone a moment to look through notes. Next up is wastewater collection.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Mayor Jen.
Is just noticing that we're restarting the inmate program. And I was just curious about, I know that it was paused and I know it's coming back, and just curious about that.
Yeah, Marie.
So, did you want me to take that?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, yes. Joel expressed desire to restart the inmate program. We had paused that for a little bit just to sort of realign the staff a few years ago and sort of see what we could do without the inmate program. There's pros and cons to the program. And I believe Joel really wanted to start it possibly last year, but there's been some turnover with the state and finding the person to implement the contract and also address some stipulations we wanted to put on the contract for the quality of inmate that we received was sort of stalled out. So I think he just wants to restart that now. The inmates are very limited on what they're allowed to do, and they can't run any, heavy machinery. They can't drive any vehicles. They can basically hand us tools and help dig and things like that, but we pick them up over at the facility, and then they have to be under our constant supervision. So that's where we are with that. We want to explore it to bring it back again, but it is some help that we could use.
I'll just say that anything that can also be done to make that relationship as reciprocal as possible, so that they are gaining training and experience, within the bounds within those restrictions, so that we can offer them something back that they can use when they get out.
Sure. Commissioner Ferguson?
Yeah, along those lines, because this was something that both the Reentry Council and the partnership have interest in, and that is, for a while, the wages that we were paying was the lowest of the jurisdictions. And both the partnership and the reentry are advocating that municipalities who utilize inmates for labor pay them at least minimum wage or more, because that does help them prepare for release. And I know that's a big budget thing, but it's also it's something that both organizations mindful of that I don't want to get too to derail us, but I know what we were paying it was extraordinarily low.
Eric, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, there was a misunderstanding, and there may not be on this particular issue, but I know multiple times Will Baker, who was the assistant utilities director at the time, and I and other staff met with different folks who were wanting us to pay much higher wages, but there was a difference between the program that we were putting the inmates through, which was different than like somebody who, I know we've got a local builder who has through the work release program.
Right.
And people were doing a much higher skill set. They had more flexibility. They had more ability to do things when our folks were far limited. And after we spent time to explain people the difference, that helped, but we seemed to we had to have that conversation every few years. If we were needing to pay minimum wage or much higher, it may be worth us just to hire another person due to all the restrictions that we have. And tonight's probably not the forum, and I'm not well equipped to have that discussion, but we could have in the future, whether it's the utilities director or Joel Lashley, who would be supervising, to bring back these different options and educate us about the difference between a work release program. And if we had somebody that fell into a work release, then we'd probably be like happy to pay that amount. But it's often hit or miss with the skill sets that come in.
Okay, I have a question. That goes back to page 158. I'm sorry, but I couldn't find it. And I want to know how many fire hydrants we have. Does anybody know?
Yes, we are pushing 800 fire hydrants with the addition of the recent subdivisions like Collins Ridge.
Okay, so you're counting Collins Ridge? Or you are?
No, not in the number in the budget justification form. We haven't
Okay.
accepted them yet, but we are getting ready to.
Okay, I just need to know so I can tell when I can give that in my report at the fire department.
Oh, how many yes, I can
Yeah,
certainly
yeah, there are
provide that
things
to
like-
you.
But there are things like this that they like to hear.
Yes, and we just provided them an updated map of all the hydrants currently in our system.
Do you happen to have an extra one of those?
I'd be happy to give you an extra one.
I would appreciate it. That would make me very happy. Thank you.
You just let me know how large you want it, because I can make it wall size for you, and I can make it smaller.
Well, you don't have to make it wall size.
That'd be some fun wallpaper there.
Yes, it could be wallpaper.
Also some good trivia, Hillsborough trivia there. There's nothing else on that. We can move to wastewater collection. 173, any questions? All right. Next one is wastewater treatment plant, page 180. Not seeing any questions there either. So the final one for water and sewer is the contingency budget. All right. Just opening it up to any water and sewer related questions or comments before we move on. Mayor Weaver.
I just want to say thank you to Marie and everyone who worked on the water sewer budget. You know, I think that the discussions that we've been having for the past couple of months and, you know, town board meetings previous have just left us well poised and prepped to look at all of this. So that's probably why we don't have a lot of questions. So thank you for all the work and discussion that's already gone into this. It's a lot.
All right. So those were all the ones for water and sewer. I believe the next item that was scheduled for discussion was on rates for general fund and water and sewer if time allowed. So I wanted to open it up to Mayor Weaver and Eric if you have any thoughts of having that discussion tonight versus next week.
Erica, I would imagine it might be best to wait until next week when some of these other numbers have been crunched, but am open to starting that now.
Whatever the board's preference is, staff is flexible.
All right, board members, are you interested in beginning that conversation or waiting until we have more finalized numbers with the changes and requests that have been made tonight?
I can't say that I have a strong preference.
I would go ahead and do it. Follow my mind is on it. And you got everybody here.
Well, it's true. We're all here. I think we'll all be here. You know, we'll be here next week too.
Okay, well, it really doesn't matter. I'm prepared.
I have no preference.
Okay. Well, to me, it feels like it would be, we would be able to get to a decision point more easily next week when we have the information back to us. So I would suggest that we wait and do it all then, because I think that if we start talking about it tonight, we're likely to talk about the same things over again next week, but we'll have more robust information. So are people at peace with waiting till next week? Okay, I'm seeing nodding of heads. Is that okay with you, Evelyn, to wait till we have the updated numbers? Okay, thank you.
Mayor Jim?
Yes, I wondered where you went.
I
Hello.
lost internet.
No.
I have lost internet. I cannot connect to anything. So I am on my phone. So I can't see anybody.
Well,
I'm going to try to get through where I'm visual. So I hope I'm not breaking open meetings or remote meetings, but I'm trying to get back in.
No worries. Bob is shaking his head saying you're fine. We're glad that you're with us. You know, bless these remote meeting laws while we have them. And so Kathleen, just I'm not sure if you could hear everything, but we're going to wait to talk about rates and any rates or fee changes until revenue and rates changes until next week when we have updated numbers before us.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I missed that part.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for the great questions. Thank you, all the staff members who were here. Emily and Jen, thanks for walking us through all of those pages and for all the work that went into getting that here. Much appreciated. I know it's a ton of work and I know it's not over yet. So thank you. The next item on our agenda until we'll be back next week for more budget discussions, but next we can move on to item 4B, which is a flag management discussion. And so this is some follow-up, just needing some clarity from when we, as a body back in April, voted to purchase and install flags for the month of Pride. And before I turn this over to Margaret, I just want to say, to take some ownership for the fact that I think that we as a board failed to give very clear instructions about what we definitely wanted. And I think we had a vision that both flags would be up at the same time for at least a portion of the month from Flag Day on. And in our good intentions not to burden staff, asked staff to figure it out, but weren't clear on what those parameters were. So that's on us, and apologies. And I think that we can get some clarity tonight, at least to get us through this first iteration, learn something, and hopefully have a clear and ready plan moving forward or at least come up with one next year. So I'll be quiet and turn it over to Margaret, and then we can figure this out.
Thanks, Mary Jen. Yeah, I did not hear clearly from the board last month that, I understood there was an interest in having pride flags up, and that there was not an interest to, not have the state and US flags up when we would normally have them up. And there was an interest to expand the time that we put the state and US flags up to span between Flag Day and Juneteenth. But I didn't really understand that it was a definite interest to have all 3 flags up for at least a portion of the time. So what we did was, while the suggestion to alternate the flags seemed very reasonable, that actually makes more work. And if you look closely at where the flags are installed, there's not really a pattern. And there's a lot of people who are very visually oriented. And if we just randomly selected, did the every 3rd flag, it would look very disjointed. And I'm sure we would have negative feedback on that as well. So staff took a little liberty. The flags were up for Memorial Day. They came down very early on the morning of the 1st. They were switched out. The pride flags went up. Our intent was for the pride flags to come down and the state and US flags to go up this Friday in time for Flag Day. They would stay up through Juneteenth, and then the flags would come down on the 21st, and nothing would go up until the US and state flags came back up for the 4th of July on the Friday before the 4th. So I understand now that there's an interest to have the pride flags come back up, and an interest to have all 3 flags up at once. So we're here to receive whatever further direction the board would like to offer.
Thank you, Margaret. It is a lot, and there's numerous logistics involved. And it would certainly be simpler if there were less happening in 1 month, but here we are, and I think we can figure it out, like I said, at least to get through this time. I'm just to get the conversation going, I will offer to board members, and certainly am open to other suggestions, that I liked the suggestion that seemed like a way to get us through here, that was in the packet, of leaving the pride flags up except on either King or Churton, taking those down and installing the American flags and state flags for the Flag Day through Juneteenth time period. I will add another suggestion to that, which is to just leave them that way through the 4th of July, to have even less up and down burden on the staff. It definitely feels important that we have pride flags up throughout the month of Pride. And so I'm going to, I know that there is one worry about wear and tear on the flags, and I would suggest that there is, that this could just be an opportunity to see what happens when they're up for that period of time, because they are an expense, but they don't seem so expensive that we couldn't replace them from time to time. I'm just not sure how quickly they, that they would wear out or how often that would be an issue. So with that, I would like to open it up to others. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just, as I was thinking about this, there's a gap in my knowledge of which flags fly on which holidays and for how long throughout the year. And so, so Margaret or staff, does anybody have like an explanation of that? Or is there a calendar that we have where we, to help remind us when to put things up and when to take things down and what day of the week it falls and that kind of stuff?
Well, there's not a calendar per se, but there is an adopted list, which is very, very dated. I will say that generally the flags go up on Friday and they come down on Monday. So they're basically up for 3 days because most of the holiday, or they come down first thing Tuesday morning, depending on how the holiday falls. If you give me just 1 minute, I can read you the list of holidays that they're supposed to go up for. Because I'm sure I have it somewhere. But, it's really, the interest is to keep it closer to the 3 days because we always fly the state and US flags together. There is no other holiday that we have something different for. It's always the state and US flags. The only time we did anything different was the other year when Airmount had their Scottish event, and we had that we put up the Scottish flags in a few limited locations at their request. But other than that, it's 3 days. Dustin tells me that they last maybe somewhere 3 to 5 years. But it's very much okay, here we go. So I still recall the last time we did this was when Catherine Martin was on the board, and I can't tell you what year that was, because when I get through this list, you'll understand. So Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, Memorial Day, Flag Day, Independence Day, Moon Landing Day, which is July 16th, in case anyone needs to know, Veterans Day, and Pearl Harbor Day. Staff did tell me that they've gotten a little bit lax about the Moon Landing Day and Pearl Harbor Day, in part because when they're out there putting up the flags, they have the public asking them, what are you putting the flag up for? And so we've probably gotten a little bit lax on that. I seem to remember way in the past, we used to put them up maybe over Og Day, which was Father's Day weekend, which then moved. But I had intended to bring that whole discussion back a little bit later, let you guys look at that again, talk about whether 3 days was enough or we wanted to go to 5 to capture some of the feedback that we've gotten about folks who seem to miss that the flags were up over Memorial Day, and document what we're doing for Pride and what we're doing for Juneteenth. I just hadn't really pulled all that together for right now, but 3 days for those holidays.
Okay. Thank you. That's informative, and I was not aware of Moon Landing Day. That's a new one.
I'm sure there's greeting cards somewhere for that.
Yeah. When I was doing some research on flags and holidays, I found numerous lists. Some had as many as 39 different days for flying flags. So I would welcome an opportunity for us to kind of holistically look at all the holidays and all the flags and update our list of and approve a list of what days we celebrate by flying flags.
Hallmark could offer even more opportunities for flags.
What will?
Hallmark.
There you go.
There's a flag for every day, maybe many more.
This is Kathleen. I actually thank you, Mark, because that's something that I concur with. I'd like to have a holistic approach and actually have. I'm visual on this, and so I'm hearing this. But want to look at a calendar and look at what we have upwind. And anyhow, so that's all I want to say about that for right now.
So Jen has made a proposal. Yeah, I would support leaving the pride flags up and then adding North Carolina and American flags on Flag Day and keeping them up. I personally like them up longer rather than just 2 or 3 days. And gosh, what a lot of work that must be to put them up just for a few days and take them back down again. So it would not bother me at all if they went up for Flag Day and then stayed up through after July 4th.
The challenge with that is that they do get wrapped around the poles, in the trees, in the wires, and we get complaints about that. And staff prefers not to go out and address those situations because that's a lot of time and work. And so that's one reason why we display them for such a short period of time is 3 days. But as I said, we can do whatever the board would like us to do.
Go ahead, Rob.
I also like that alternative that you offered, Margaret, and Mayor Weaver and Commissioner Bell noted. And I don't know if all the flags get tangled, or is there certain ones that, always, because they're so close to a wire or a tree or something like that, if there's a way that we can potentially leave multiple flags up, I would like that option, but I understand also it's a maintenance and wear and tear sort of thing too. But I like your suggestion for the alternative flag flying.
Yeah, Margaret, is that is the flags getting tangled? Is that just kind of a crapshoot, like it happens and you don't know if it's going to happen?
Yeah, because it depends on which way the wind, quite frankly, it depends on which way the wind is blowing, or whether a big truck goes by and creates breeze. So what I'm hearing, am I hearing, I'm hearing put the flags, put the state and US flags up for Flag Day and Juneteenth and possibly leave them up through the 4th of July. I'm assuming, I'm assuming it's on one street or the other, and that have we successfully ended the conversation of interspersing them, because it will be disjointed until we have a map that shows where the actual flag posts are, so that we could attempt to come up with a pattern.
That sounds amenable to me, but I see that Matt has his hand up.
So there's a few things. I checked in with our neighboring jurisdictions in Orange County, and Chapel and Carrboro also put up pride flags. They've done them in various ways. Carrboro has done them interspersed. Chapel Hill mostly does not intersperse them at all. They leave up pride flags for all of the month of June. And personally speaking, I would leave the pride flags up for the whole month of June as is. Part of it is we've gotten a lot of complaints about which flags we fly, when we flag them. Quite frankly, many of the complaints have at best a tinge of homophobia, and at worst, blatant homophobia. And frankly, I think taking them down and even interspersing them shows some sort of capitulation, or at least that's how it's going to be perceived. And so maybe I'm unreasonable, but I think any plan other than just leaving them up, at least for this first time in June, for the entire month of June, I'm likely not going to support any alternative. And I'm probably being unreasonable on that, but that is how I feel.
Mark,
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to definitely keep the pride flags throughout the month of June. But how do we add North Carolina and American flags to what appears to be a traditional flag flying event for the town? If we can't interdisperse them, what other options are there? I don't know. Margaret, do you have, well, how can you?
Well, the suggestion that I'd had is perhaps we change out the flags on Churton Street to be the state and US, and then leave the pride flags up on King. The mayor suggested the alternative of putting the state and US flags on King and leave the pride flags on Churton, because, just having it go down the street makes it very easy for the staff to do. And then on Nash Street, we would pick one side of the street or the other, because there's flags on both sides. And I don't think there's more than 5 flags that go over there.
And can you please remind us how the flags are attached to the poles? Is there a permanent flag holder on each pole?
Yes, but it's not on each and every pole.
Okay.
They're kind of hit and miss, because there's also a clearance issue with Duke and DOT on where they allow us to put them. So not every pole has, just like not every pole can have Christmas decorations, not every pole has the flag. And that's why we don't have a map of which poles have what. And so I can't present that to you in some kind of plan.
Okay. So in other words, we can't just add additional flags in with any kind of rhyme or reason, because they may not be appropriate. We don't have flag holders.
Correct.
And so we have
And there is this whole, if I remember right, and I wasn't really paying that close of attention to this because it was outside my area at the time we really talked about the flags and the Christmas decorations and the banners. There are spacing requirements. We have to know which lines are electric, and there's some sort of spacing requirement with that. And there's, how far they project out into the street, that where they might get caught on a passing truck. And so that's why the pattern is so irregular. And yes, we should have mapped it by now, but we haven't. And so we can't just go put up a bunch more flag brackets and multiply the number of flags we have downtown.
Okay.
It's not that simple.
Well, thank you. That's informative. Well, it sounds to me that we have essentially double booked our flag flying responsibilities, and the only practical thing to do is to replace some of the pride flags with North Carolina and or American flags, or rearrange them so they're one's on one side of the street or some are on King and some are on Churton, or some variation. We can't just add a lot more American and North Carolina flags for Flag Day. So I'm not sure what the solution is, but maybe we have 2 more weeks to figure it out by the next meeting. Maybe if we can't figure it out tonight, I'm just saying that we've got 1 more meeting to go before Flag Day. So maybe we can figure it out by then.
I think our next meeting is on Flag Day.
Yeah, the flags would actually go up this Friday. So we've got,
okay.
This is your shot.
Okay.
So I would like to update, I would like to revise my suggestion. And it would be more work for Public Works than what I previously suggested. And then it would just be, let's say it would be more work if we choose to do this. Then I think we know we're going to take a breather. This was the first time we were doing this, and then figure out what the plan is for next year. Maybe try to come up with something that is less work. So, and this somewhat, I hope, takes into account what Matt was saying. Because I think it's important to be clear that this discussion is not about the merits of the pride flags or the American flags or state flags, and that these flags are not in any way in opposition to each other. That all of these flags support celebrate the rights and privileges of what it means to be who we are and live in this country. So they should work in concert together. And that said, some of the feedback that we've gotten has, as Matt said, some of it has been homophobic, overtly or covertly. That said, when we first, when Matt, when you first said, brought this before the board that we purchase and install these flags, the direction we were trying to give was to have the US and state flags up when they usually are, thinking they could all be done at the same time. That was our shared understanding when we left that last meeting. And I want to put a pin in the point that one reason for that is because Juneteenth is also a new town employee holiday, and something that we as a local government and community are also trying to really honor and celebrate. And so that was an additional day that it was assumed we were going to be flying at least some of the US and state flags. So my suggestion would be that from Flag Day, or this Friday, as Margaret was saying, they would go up. On one street, we install the US and state flags and have those through Juneteenth, whatever the correct number of days, through Juneteenth is. So I guess maybe through that Monday. And then we take all those down and put the pride flags back up for the remainder of June. And then put the US and state flags, then everything comes down when they normally would at the end of the month, and then put up the US flags for 4th of July. So that's more work, that's more up and down, but it might be more in the spirit of embracing Pride Month and embracing Flag Day and Juneteenth. One tradition old, one tradition new. And so I think what's needed is for town board staff Margaret is saying clearly, they'll do what we tell them to do, but we need to get on board with the plan. So Rob.
Well, I was just gonna say, I'd support that idea. I think it allows the pride flags to fly all month, but it also brings the state and the US flag into important dates and times too. So I like that idea. I did see that Evelyn had her hand up a while ago, so I just wanted to see if she had anything to share on this also.
Thank you, Rob, and I'm so sorry, Evelyn. Yeah, go ahead, Evelyn.
Okay, I have tried to speak several times. I would agree as long as you get the United States flag and the North Carolina flag up. The Flag Day up. Flag Day and United States flag, American flag up. I could go along with that, but you've got to have the two major ones, because I have had nothing but complaints. I've only received one person who was opposed to it. The rest of them come in and tell me. And you have to realize that they're all different types of people in the town, and that's what you want. But you've got veterans who I think who are getting older, and I've noticed. In fact, we've had we had Mr. Smith to die. He was a former town. He was a town board member for a good number of years. He died. It's getting so to me that somebody dies who's getting older. So maybe to let them see the flags while they're still living this time, and then we think it over. I mean, go through it. We go through a process, but I think you should always, I mean, it's extremely important for the 4th of July. If you didn't have it if you didn't have the American flag up for the 4th of July, that would really be bad. And I think Flag Day is extremely important too. But having Flag Day and having the flag on the 4th of July, or having both on the 4th of July, I think I could live with that. But I don't want to skip those two.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. And I really apologize for missing your hand earlier. I've been trying to look up at your square, but I missed it, and I am sorry.
I wonder about that. That's why it thundered.
You've got to wave your hands at me sometimes.
It's because you skipped me. That's why we had the thunder. You better be careful going outside.
Mark, go ahead.
Just want to make sure that I'm understanding your proposal correctly. The pride flags would temporarily come down to accommodate Flag Day and Juneteenth.
On one street.
On one street. Which street are you proposing?
Which street?
I would imagine Churton Street. Then when there's also going to be a Juneteenth parade that will be, I believe, not a parade, excuse me, a march that will be crossing King Street somewhere. And then, I'm sorry, crossing Churton Street somewhere. I do not know the route.
So you won't have the flag, you won't have them on King Street?
The proposal that I'm making is to have the US flags and the state flags flying on Churton Street from Flag Day, June 14th through Juneteenth, which is on the 19th. Those dates won't be precise because of what Margaret said about how they're left up for several days. Then those flags, after they've flown the appropriate time, would come down and the pride flags would be reinstalled on Churton Street, as well as where they would already be through the end of the month.
I'm totally confused. So you would have, on the 4th of July, you wouldn't have them on King Street too?
No, on the 4th of July, you'd have the US flag.
Just like it's always been.
Just like always, yes.
But I don't know that I want to look at the pride flags on the entire time, for entire time. Well, I'm going to hear it one way or the other, so.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the gig. And I just want to iterate that there are many, many people who this is really, really important to and feel seen and appreciated by their community.
I mean, so are the others. You have to consider the entire town and those who've lived here all their lives.
Mark.
Mayor Jen, at some point, can you, I don't have a way to raise my hand, but.
I'm so sorry, Kathleen. Why don't we let Mark go and then you go ahead.
Perfect.
Just one suggestion and one observation. One is the last day of June is Wednesday, the 30th, and the 4th of July flags would go up on Friday, the 2nd. So I don't know if it's a time saver for staff to just change out the pride flags for all American and North Carolina flags on Friday, the 2nd, to save a round of flag moving. And
or to change them, I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to cut you off, but or to change them out on the 30th, but just put them up earlier. Either one of those options saves a trip.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And the other thing is, I just want to observe publicly that My experience has been that I've received 10 times as many compliments about the pride flags as I have complaints, and that all the complaints I've received, except for one, were from people who do not live in the town of Hillsborough. So I just wanted to go on record saying that I appreciate hearing the compliments, and can't please everybody all the time, but we do what we can.
Thank you, Mark. Kathleen.
Yes, I've heard mixed responses. I've had probably as many residents who are Hillsborough residents who support as who don't support. Just putting that out there, but is, one of the things that was brought to my attention is, and I don't know the answer, and I was kind of getting lost in when the flags are up or down. But I had a couple residents who were asking me whether or not the pride flags were up for a total number of days that were more than the total number of days that the American and the state flags are. I don't know the answer to that. But it seems to me that, Memorial, that if we have the, if there was a way to have if we have the pride flags up for the entire month of June, that whenever we do put up the American and state flags, because of this, that we do have, there are national flags and our state flags, that we have at least the same number of days. I actually, from Memorial Day through the 4th of July, for some reason, I thought they were up, which tells me I'm not that observant. But anyhow, I think that's, because of the veterans, because they are state and national flags, that we just make sure that we do have them up for, if we have specialty flags, that we also have those flags up for the same amount of time or more, however we do it.
I think I would just like to, thank you for that comment, Kathleen. I think I would just like to reflect on that I would encourage us to steer clear of any perception that pride flags and American flags are in any kind of competition with each other. Part of what we are dealing with. Okay, so I'm sorry, totally Kathleen, I know you can't see. Part of what we're dealing with here is a matter of timing, a matter of a calendar. That Pride Month happens to be celebrated for a month. And in municipalities across the country, certainly not everyone, but I was so glad that we became one, that flags are flown for a month. And so that is not the tradition for these other things. And we can certainly make our own traditions. But I think that things are going to start to get really strange if we say that something has to happen for the same amount of time to sort of give the impression we're making up for something, because I think that is what people would feel. We certainly have lots of LGBTQ veterans, they should not be seen in opposition. And I do think we need to have a clear, thought out plan for what we're going to do about all kinds of flags and when. And that's a discussion that we're going to need to have later when Margaret brings that back to us. But for now, we just need to get through what we're going to do for the rest of this month.
And for the record, Jen, I certainly am not intending to perpetuate that the flags are in competition or in opposition of one another. But I am intending to share feedback that I have received from residents.
Yeah, it's the same
Thank
I
you.
had.
So, Matt, how do you feel about the revised plan that we're discussing? Is that something that you could get on board with?
Oh.
Okay. Well, I think I would just also like to say for the record that that I just support you as our only LGBTQ board member, and it is unfortunate that that this is a question. It's frustrating. So, Margaret, do you need a vote or just general direction?
I just want to be crystal clear, since we were not crystal clear the first time. That the direction is to, on June 11th, we would replace the flags on Churton Street that face or hang over Churton Street. So if any of them that are at the intersection and they're on the side street, they would stay on the side street. For June 11th through June 21st, which is the Monday after Juneteenth, state and US flags in their normal pattern would go in on Churton Street. On the 21st, we would come back, take the state and US flags down and put up the pride flags along Churton Street. Then it gets a little bit hazy at the end of the month. On the 1st of July, can we take down the pride flags and put up the state and US flags and let them fly a little bit longer for the 4th of July this year, and then take them down on July 5th will be the holiday, so the morning of the 6th, and then come back with a plan? Or do folks want to let them go, let the pride flags stay up until the morning of July 2nd, and then do the normal 3-day for the state and US? I just want to be crystal clear, since there's wiggle room, of what and what do we want to do with Nash Street?
I would propose that the switch out, I don't sense from this board that the switch out of the flags, whether it's on the 1st of July or the 2nd of July, I don't see that as being, I think it's fine if it's done in one trip. Is that what you're asking, Margaret?
Well, I understood that we wanted it to be in one trip for efficiency's sake. I just wanted to be clear on whether it was important, on whether it happens on July 1st or July 2nd.
I have not picked up that that is important. I think either day is fine. And then I see you have your hand up, Rob. I would just throw up that or throw out that Nash Street could just stay with the pride flags. And we don't need to be switching those out, and we do the ones on Churton. But that was a good bet. It's a good question about what to do, but we don't have to do that. Rob?
I was just going to say that I wouldn't want to bring anything down before the end of June. And so if we're looking to target a date, that it'd be like July 1st, not do it the last day of June.
Well, you do have Flag Day in there.
Yeah, you will see American flags on Churton Street on Flag Day.
Yep, for June 11th through the 21st to cover both Flag Day and Juneteenth.
June the 11th.
June the 11th, this Friday, through Monday, June the 21st, to capture Flag Day and Juneteenth.
Rob.
So Matt, I just want to clarify, if we flip that and left the pride flags up on Churton, could you get behind something like that, or is it?
No.
Okay, that's fair.
To me, this is something that is the first time we've done something. I, quite frankly, I'm not willing to entertain even inaccurate information about whether or not we even flew Memorial Day flags. And, to be honest with you, it was quite hurtful to read those emails as if, even if they're not from people in town, and even if people in town had those thoughts and expressed them with some of my colleagues, I quite frankly don't care if you're offended about a pride flag going up for the entire month of June. And if someone thinks that that is the wrong way for me to believe, they can file in July of 2023 when I file for re-election. But this, to me, for a lot of people, is very important. For the first time, yes, maybe it was not well communicated to staff. Staff had to work with what they thought they heard. But I am, at this point, unwilling to entertain an alternative just because of how people will receive it. Because quite frankly, it's going to go the other direction and people are going to be upset, frankly, no matter what. But I'd rather them be upset because I decided this was important enough to just oppose anything. And that's just what I'm going to do. And I have no qualms doing it. So, all the business, I'll flip it on this, on the other side. I've heard a lot of positive feedback from a lot of businesses that I go to about whether or not, about how great it was to see them and questioning whether or not, did I just miss them in other years, or have these flags been flown before? Or, a lot of the other feedback. I know there were people who did not come to me who were also business owners who apparently also did not like it. But, I'm just not willing to, entertain it in a way that may be viewed as a capitulation the first time that we do this, whether they live in town or don't live in town or what have you. And I've stayed silent for most of this discussion because I don't think that I'm willing to entertain anything different. And, y'all, the other 5 members of the board can come up with something that can give staff clear direction, but I'm not going to participate in finding an alternative that seemingly satisfies everybody.
Thank you, Matt. I really want to honor what you had to say and your choice there. I also want to say that I personally don't view where I'm coming from is not trying to make everybody happy. Where I'm trying to come from is what we all decided we were going to do when we chose to purchase and install the flags, and are just trying to make that clear to staff. So I definitely understand, not in the same embodied way because of my lived experience, and I want to acknowledge and honor that you do. But it in turn feels important for the record that this isn't what we're doing here isn't because of feedback that we've gotten. It's because staff needs to know how to do what we asked them to do in the first place, because we all agreed unanimously to Matt, please let me finish my train of thought, and then I'll hand it back to you, because sometimes I'll lose it. Well, I actually just lost my train of thought. So why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, but I get that. But also in some of our private communications, it's been articulated that staff have also been harassed about these flags, and quote, who approved the flags. I am not going to endorse an action that seemingly endorses that line of thinking, even if that's not why we're doing it, because frankly, it's going to be viewed by those same people that somehow they had an effect over our thinking. And I'm not willing to give those types of people the satisfaction. I'm just not.
Mark.
Yeah, I want to say I really appreciate Matt's comments and perspective, and as the father of an LGBTQ person who has already lobbied the mayor on a phone call for the flags being kept as much as possible. I'm totally in alignment with your sentiment, and I'm not, where I'm coming from, it has nothing to do with I don't want to be seen as capitulating to that kind of hatred and bigotry, for sure. My only kind of last point is how to reconcile that we have committed to putting up 3 different flags simultaneously, and how do we thread that needle of either changing. We're going to have to change what we have previously said that we were going to do as a board, and we just need to figure out how to do that. We can compromise, or we can just not fly some of those flags.
Well, I'm not willing to give up the American flag and the North Carolina flag. They've always been there, and they're people who've lived here, and they're people who've moved here, and everybody may have a different opinion, but that's my opinion. I want the American flag and the North Carolina flag. And it wouldn't be fair to have the pride flag for the entire month and then not have the American flag and the North Carolina flag for people who paid taxes. Those flags cost money too, and they help pay for them. And you have to think about who paid for the pride. I don't know who paid for the pride. I guess the town paid for the pride flag. I didn't give anything extra to it. I didn't give any, but I have bought American flags and North Carolina flags. And at one point when we had desert storms, the flags flew the entire time, and we had to buy all new flags. And then we had the town flag, the town flag with a clock on it. We've had 2 of those. It wouldn't hurt to have those sometime. And I can see your point, but I have my views too. And I can accept your view, but I don't want to see your flag every single day. And I call it your flag because you're the one who's fighting for it. Where did you go? You disappeared. You're over here.
Yeah, I think it's probably a difficult conversation, and I think that I would not call this we all, I am so thrilled and I'm going to help move us along. But this flag isn't about one person. It is about
I
all
know
of
what
us
it's about.
who voted as a board to make this decision. And I was thrilled that we did that. I'm thrilled with that we have the flags up, and the response has been really powerful and moving. And so, I would, as a resident and leader of this town, I claim that flag for all of us. So let's move forward. I believe that we have a plan, and it is important that this be clear, and that I think one final detail is about Nash Street, which I have suggested we just leave the pride flags on Nash Street, or we could switch out a couple of them. There are 4 flags on Nash Street. So I think I could just use some input and let's move this forward. Mark.
Jen, if we're going to make a compromise, I think we need to err on the side of compromising to leave as many pride flags up for as long as possible.
So you're saying leave the ones on Nash Street? And
Yeah.
and Mark, just because this is such a, this is feeling very fraught, is that I really do not see this discussion as a compromise, because what we said back in April is that there was going to be a period of time where we wanted both flags to fly. It just turned out that that was going to be more, we didn't give good direction on that. And so we need to come up with a clear plan. So this doesn't feel like a compromise. This feels like what we all along said we were going to do. So just figuring out how to do it.
Mayor Jim?
Yes.
First of all, no, I support your proposal because I do agree. We voted and were unanimous. I feel I do need to clarify one point on behalf of several people that I did hear from, which was not that they were unsupportive of pride. It really was, it was really, and I don't know how we can support this, but it was, they were viewing it as competing with the state and American flags. And I do think that there is I think we have an important role in forwarding the discussion that the flags are not competitive or mutually exclusive or an opposite, that it's and not but, or and not or. And we're not going to solve this tonight, but I think that there's a real opportunity that we have as a community to forward that conversation. I hope that made sense. It's hard. It's really hard to have this on the phone and I can't see anybody.
Understood. And thank you, Kathleen. And I agree. Mark, were you about to say something? Oh, no, you had just said something about Nash Street. So are we ready to close this discussion? Okay. Margaret, do you feel like you have it?
Just to say it one more time, the flags will remain as they are until Friday, June 11th. On Friday, June 11th, state and US flags will go on Churton Street only. They will stay up through the 21st. On the 21st, the state and US flags will come down and pride flags will go back up. And on the 1st, they'll swap out all of the pride flags will come down and the state and US flags will go up per usual for the 4th of July for one extra day.
Yes.
No changes on Nash Street.
Yes.
That's what I heard. If that's your direction, I don't know that we necessarily need a motion on it, but if anybody's unclear, now's the time to clear it.
All right. I believe we're settled. All right. Thank you, Margaret. And then that brings us to item number 5, other business. Is there any other business? Item number 6, committee updates and reports. Rob, any updates?
No updates other than it was upcoming swag meeting on Thursday, but I don't have anything to report tonight.
Mark, any updates?
I have no updates.
Evelyn, any updates?
I have a meeting coming up.
Matt, any updates? Kathleen, any updates?
Only that to keep an eye out on Triangle J and ARP funding, what we can and what we can do, and guidance for strategic planning.
Thank you, Kathleen. And I also have, I do not have updates. MPO is this week, but I will not be there, but Mark will be there, right? I think he'll still be there. So thank you. And I have no other updates. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second. I said,
We can roll call that vote.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd,
And we are adjourned. Until next week. Have a good evening, everyone.